And now we're going to move on to why we're all here. Kevin is a certified career and leadership coach. His work has also spanned leadership communication, presentation skills, professional presence, team building, and conflict management. He has more than 10 years of experience successfully coaching primarily early and mid-career professionals, career changers, high potential leaders, medical doctors, and graduate and undergraduate students. And with that, Kevin, I'm going to pass it off to you, and let's have you pull up your webcam and mic when you get a chance. And thank you again to everyone else for joining us for today's presentation.
Everyone, this is Kevin Kiley, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Cassie. I sure appreciate it. And thank you all for joining me on this webinar this morning. We've got a lot of great things to get to, and I'm very enthusiastic and very happy that you all took the time to join today. Wanted to start off the presentation today with a story about someone that I coached some time ago. This gentleman approached me, and we'll just for purposes of the illustration, we'll use his name. We'll say his name is Matt. He had been he had approached me because he was interested in new employment, and it turns out that he was at his current position for barely 11 months when he first contacted me. He was interested in me being his career coach, and 11 months is a little quick to be looking for a new role. And so I said to him, I said, wow, I said, so tell me what happened, why are you looking for a new job? And he told me the story that he had been with his previous employer for about 5 years. And when he hit that 5-year plateau, he was kind of at a situation where he just wasn't so sure about where he was going with his overall career. He didn't know if he wanted to stay with that organization or go on to something different. And sure enough, apparently a recruiter found him on LinkedIn, and she wanted to put him in front of a company for a possible new job. And so he said, wow, that sounds great. Who doesn't want to be wanted, and that sort of thing? Who doesn't like to be recruited? So he said, sure, no problem. Fast forward 10 days, and he'd been through the interview process and the vetting process and everything, and he had a job offer. And the job offer was for about a 50% pay increase is what he was doing. And it was a title increase. It was to be for going from a manager to a director. And, and it was going to be a situation where, he was just going to be, it's a new opportunity. So he said, so he took the job. And fast forward again 11 months, and now he's contacting me for career coaching. And I said, Matt, I said, Mike, he said, what happened? What happened in 11 months that went from, having, something that was seemingly, a great thing to not so much. And he said, well, when he got into the role, he discovered a few things. First of all, he found out that it was kind of an unwritten sort of cultural thing at that particular organization, that everyone worked 10-hour days, and everyone was, it was one of those things, you're in early, you're there kind of late, you work through lunch, you're always plugged in. And that didn't really align with Matt's sort of wavelength as a professional. And the other big thing is that he realized that the corporate culture was very sort of top down. Senior managers were very, not to say micromanaging, but he said that they were very, even for minor decisions, you had to get senior leadership's buy-in, and he just didn't care for that. So even though he had, the title increase and he was a director now, he felt like he described it as a very mother may I kind of culture, and that just didn't work for him. So the other thing is I guess he's the breadwinner in his family, and Matt was concerned that the benefits weren't so good, and especially the health benefits. He was a big company. He just assumed that because it was a big company, that he would be able that they'd have good benefits, and they were just okay. So all of a sudden he's looking for a new job, and so fortunately the story has a happy ending. He works in operations, and he was able, after we worked together for a little while, he was able to get something that was much more sort of aligned with him. But what this story illustrates is one of the key principles that I hope everyone in this webinar takes out of it, and that is this business of uninformed decisions are inherently risky. Whenever we have decisions, especially big ones like the ones that concern our careers, hopefully we gain as much information as we possibly can up front, and so that when it comes time to make those decisions, we can make good, informed decisions. Matt's circumstance was a great illustration of an uninformed decision. He got fast-tracked through a process. He got allured by the bigger salary, more title, the better title, And again, who doesn't want to be recruited? And he ended up making an uninformed decision, and he paid for it in a big way. Fortunately, he's back on track now. But what this webinar is all about is making sure that we are able to make informed decisions when it comes to our career paths, to our jobs. And that's what I want all of us to take out of this session here today. Here's the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit how a lot of people approach their job. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a better way to, actually a lot better way to do it. 4 key things to know before you start applying and how you determine each of those 4 things. Some strategies and approaches to how you can find those things out. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about the research process, and we'll talk also about informational interviews. I'll kind of take you through a step-by-step as to how you can best to do those informational interviews, and we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. In fact, I'm going to do my best to leave the last 15 minutes or so of this for Q&A. It's really important that we have that time and that you have a chance to ask any questions that you might have. Use the chat tab, and then Cassie will coordinate all that stuff toward the end of the webinar. So that's what we're going to do today. Cassie gave a very gracious introduction to me, so not a lot of new information here. Just the thing I would mention is that again, having worked in talent development and the various leadership roles that I have held, I've personally been the hiring manager for more than 100 different roles. And also as working in recruiting, also working in a graduate admission space, I've read and evaluated thousands of candidate applications. And so I have a pretty good feel for what works and what doesn't work in this space. My main professional roles, I'm the founder of a career coaching consultancy called Career Roadmap. The URL is right there on the screen. If by some reason you are interested in me as your coach now or after the webinar or at any time in the future, by all means, feel free to reach out and be in touch. And my contact information will actually come up at the end of the webinar as well. I also do grad school admissions consulting through an operation called Grad School Roadmap. If you were in on the webinar last week with my colleague, Dr. Don Martin, he's my business partner there. And so if for a lot of individuals, grad school is part of their career journey, and if that would be something you'd be interested in doing, a lot of individuals get coaching around their applications these days, and that's something I do as well. So, okay, so let's jump right into this content now and talk. This is unfortunately an all too often approach that people take to the job search. They get triggered somehow, and there's a list of possible ones here. The story I mentioned earlier about Matt, his was the second one. A work anniversary was reached. He hit 5 years, and this sort of psychological thing went off in his brain, like, what am I doing here? Should I stay here? Am I here for the long haul? It could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, it could be a lot of different things. Everyone sort of has their different thing. But that, or whether they get bored, or they just have this moment of realization where, hey, this isn't what I want to do the rest of my life, whatever it may be. So then they have that happen. They update their resume, maybe they update their LinkedIn profile, they start looking at job boards and start firing off applications, and that's it, okay? That's a great recipe for an uninformed decision. That may work for some, and hey, you might get a new job, you might get fortunate, something might come through. You just, who knows? We'll just kind of have to see. You never know how these things played out, but I can tell you that is an uninformed decision. It's exactly what happened to Matt, and you basically have better chances of wasting your time and wasting everybody else's time, and leading and getting to a situation where you're just unhappy in your career. The better approach, something that is both strategic and intentional, okay? This is not, the quick gratification. It doesn't align with a laissez-faire mindset, but what it does do, it gives you the best opportunity to have a fulfilling job and a fulfilling career, one that, when you wake up every morning, you're looking forward to it. It's like, hey, this is something I could do. This is something I'm looking forward to. I'm engaged. I'm happy. But note that this is the best chance. There are no guarantees. I think probably a lot of us in our professional roles have had situations where you get into a situation where it looks pretty good, but then, this happens or that happens, or this change takes place or whatever. So unfortunately, there are no guarantees. But we're talking here about giving yourself the best chance at career fulfillment and at career happiness, so that you're making informed decisions, and that you're going to not just take any job, but you're targeting specific jobs, okay? Cassie's going to launch this poll, but I'd like to know just from our audience here, how soon do you anticipate applying? Cassie, excuse me, if you could, there it is. If you could kindly submit your responses to our poll here. And We'll give it just another couple seconds here to see kind of where we are. And then I'll ask Cassie to close it out. Looks like most of our responses are in, and 42% have already started the application process. That's awesome. Good. I mean, you're already there somehow. You've already been triggered. For some reason, you're already looking, and you're already there. Almost 20% within a month, and almost the same amount 1 to 3 months from today, and so on down the line. So it's good to know that a little over 40% have already started, and that almost another 40% are talking about either within a month or 1 to 3 months from today. So thank you for that. That is good to know with where kind of everyone in the audience is relative to their job search. Ideally, before you do start applying, however, there are 4 key things that every job seeker will know or have a very good idea of before they start applying. These are the 4 things here. For those jobs you'll target: what functional role, what industry, what kind of organization, and what are my gotta-haves. That's a Kevin Kiley term. We'll talk about that in a little bit more in depth soon. But when you have specific answers to these questions, you can apply more confidently to roles that you know that you're a strong fit for, and you're on your way to a more fulfilling job. It's a wonderful thing. These 4 questions, here's what knowing the answers to those 4 questions does not look like. You know, you hear somebody who's, I get this, unfortunately, somewhat frequently when I first start working with people in a coaching capacity. You know, it's a big company, a big brand that, you know, everyone's heard of, Amazon, Google. You know, I've heard that, they're good places to work, and I like Amazon. I like buying stuff from Amazon, or I love Google searches, and, you know, okay, I'll apply there. Okay, and they have no other basis for applying to those organizations. This is not what knowing looks like. This is what knowing does look like. I'm not going to read through this entire thing here, but you can see the level of detail. Someone who is able to articulate something like this is clearly someone who has done their homework, has done their research, has talked to people, and is very confident and sure of the specific things that they are looking for in a job search. And when you know these things and can really break it down to this level of detail, once you start actually looking for jobs, when an ideal job posting, or when you hear about something that might be coming open through your network or whatever it might be, when that presents itself, it's like this moment, you know, it just hits you square in the face that this is going to be a great opportunity for you, and you can apply to those roles with a lot more confidence, again, that it's going to be a good fit. Again, what it doesn't look like and what it looks like. This is where you want to get to. You want to get to this level here. Breaking down those 4 categories in a little bit more detail. Some of this might be very obvious to some of you on the call, but through my coaching, I've come to understand that certain people have different definitions of these things. So I want to just take a quick second to level set. Functional role is also known as the functional area. It's what you do. And there's some examples listed right there. And then also related to that would be the industry. That's more usually aligned with a sector of the economy that's defined usually by the product or services that are at the core of the work. And some examples are right there. There can be overlap between the 2 things. So for example, you can work in an IT role, or you can work in the IT industry. So it's not all, that's just one example, but it's not always these perfect silos between functional area and industry. But I did want to sort of do, again, a little level setting on what sort of those 2 things mean and what the differentiation is. And on top of that, you can do, functional areas do cut across certain industries. And there's an example of those things right here. So just because, for example, someone is a nurse doesn't mean that they're going to work for, you know, a doctor's office or for a hospital system. You could do that in the hospitality industry. If you don't believe me, have you ever been on a cruise line and they have some sort of medical ward? Usually it's at the bottom of the ship or something, and they have, you know, for if anybody, you know, gets sick or anything like that, and, you know, you get a nurse or physician's assistant or anything like that. So there is an opportunity. Just because one has a certain functional area doesn't mean that you have to work in a certain industry. There's crossover there for sure. And so the question, one question to ask yourself is, what are you targeting? Are you targeting a certain industry, a certain functional area, both? There's no wrong answer here, but you need to know this before you start applying. And for those of you thinking about a career switch, going from one thing to another, maybe you want to switch industries, maybe you want to switch functional roles. You can do both. Generally speaking, it's easier to stay in the same functional role and switch industries. It's not to say that you can't do the opposite. You can change functional roles, but broadly speaking, it's easier to switch industries. But there are definitely ways to do both, and that's a big focus in a lot of my coaching, because a lot of people are looking to make career switches. And now, frankly, is a good time to be doing stuff like that, because the job economy is actually pretty good right now. There's a lot of job opportunities, and for people looking to make a switch, there's a certain way you have to go about doing it. But it is definitely a time that you could potentially do that. The third question, getting back to that, what kind of organization? What I mean by that is, what makes up your ideal organization? Is it a big one, a small one? Is it private? Is it public company? Is it family owned? Is this an established company that's been around for decades or even centuries? Or is it a small startup, so something that is barely there? What kinds of products or services is it involved in? All these different kinds of questions. And believe it or not, this is just a partial list. Similarly, this gets into the gotta haves. This is the fourth one that you really need to explore ideally before you start applying. Salary and compensation. Obviously, ideally, you have a job that you love, and that a position that really, gets your blood pumping every morning, that you're excited about. And salary, for most people is at least somewhere on the radar, because, they have to be able to, put food on the table and pay the mortgage and pay the car note and everything else, and make sure their kids, have clothes on their back and all that kind of good stuff. You just got to make sure that you have a baseline and understanding of what that minimal acceptable salary is, and what sort of compensation it is. And oh, by the way, what's the compensation structure? Is it guaranteed? Is it commission? Is it a mix of both? Are there stock options? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's so many different things. Knowing that up front and knowing what your minimum is, really, really important. The flexibility of the schedule. We heard about that again with the story with Matt at the front of the webinar, that, hey, for him, schedule flexibility and that 10-hour workday for him just wasn't getting the job done. It wasn't for him. Geographic location, the commute, closely related. By geographic location, if you live in Chicago, are you willing to relocate to Seattle? Are you really willing to relocate to Miami or Washington, D.C., or to Shanghai? And if not those cities, are there any cities where you would be willing to relocate to? That's different from the commute. The commute is your day-to-day. When I leave my house, leave my apartment, leave my condo every day, how long is it going to be before I, and how is it going to be? How will I get to work every day? Am I going to be sitting through traffic? Am I going to be taking the train? Whatever it might be. And what's your threshold? What's your limit on that, as far as how much are you willing to do that? Know that up front. It makes no sense to apply to a company that, geographically speaking, is just literally and figuratively out of reach for you. Because where they are and where you live right now. Why even waste anyone's time by doing that? So these are the kinds of things that, again, are among the gotta haves. And once again, this is just a partial list. And just to illustrate something too, I want to open up another poll. If Cassie, if you would help me with that, please. Which of these is most important? So we have 7 options here. 6 options. And if you would go ahead and select the one that to you is most important. Again, knowing that there is no right or wrong answer here, and this is a very subjective thing. And again, it's yes, probably all of them have some degree of importance, perhaps. But what is the one most important thing? We'll keep it open for another one here, and the answers are coming in nicely. I like to see this. This is good. So we'll give it just another couple seconds here. Good stuff. So 21% salary and other compensation. That's good. Yeah, I mean, that's a very real measure of whether or not a job can be a good fit for you. And I'm not surprised at all to see that near at the top of the list of the gotta haves. Schedule flexibility is tied with ability to grow and potentially be promoted, both at 17%. Again, a common one that's at the top. No one said required travel. That's interesting. And benefits. Benefits at 29%. So we have, as this has evolved, the organizational culture and other benefits leads the way at 27%. So forgive me, I didn't see that when I was looking at the results here. But that's the lead thing. The culture and the other benefits. That was something that is something that I hear a lot about when I speak to various individuals and coach various individuals about what's going on with their job. So thank you for your participation in that. That's really good. And those results, it illustrates a key takeaway here, and that is, everyone's got-to-haves are different. We have a huge smattering of responses just from this group here in this webinar here today. And what really matters to you may not matter hardly at all to someone else who is in a very similar circumstance, but in some levels, but they're very different circumstances in others. And so when you are evaluating these different things as part of your career management, be careful about that herd mentality. Don't just move where everyone else seems to be moving. You need to make these decisions for yourself. This is not your decision. This is not your parents' decision. It's not anybody else's decision except yours. You can choose to involve other people in the decision because they may have skin in the game, so to speak, but this is your decision. Just because someone else it seems to be prioritizing, overall compensation, don't let that pull you away from the fact that your number one priority, for example, is schedule flexibility. So thank you for that great illustration there on that poll. So Kevin, what if I don't know my answers? Well, okay, to those 4 questions, that's fine. That really is okay. There are a lot of people who don't know that at all different levels of their careers. It's not as if you hit a certain point in your career and you have to know all these different things or that you automatically find out. It just doesn't work that way. You might have a certain set of understanding, but not totally. But how can you move toward knowing? 2 main things: do your homework and have your conversations. Do your research and do those informational interviews, which is what we're going to talk about for the balance of the webinar here today. And a lot of times when I bring this up with people I coach, I get a little bit of pushback on this. Oh boy, that takes time, and boy, I want a new job now. I'm really unhappy right now. Okay, well, yes, it does take time. I acknowledge that it does. But remember, we're not talking about a fast fix here. This is not the instant gratification way of going things. This is the way that's going to give you the best chance of getting a fulfilling job. Okay. And the other thing is that ideally these sorts of things are being done not just when you need a new job or when you're thinking about a new job, but through the whole course of a management of a career over your lifetime. Career management is not something that happens only when I need a new job. It's always sort of being done. And so again, we're talking about the long game for managing your career and also the long game of managing your career happiness. So we're going to talk about research, talk about informational interviews. The research process, tons of information out there online. Okay, really no reason to not be able to get a ton of information about all 4 of those areas that we talked about just by doing some research online. Okay, my biggest recommendation for as you're doing this research is to make sure that you have a way to stay organized, especially if you're evaluating, dozens of different organizations, dozens of different industries, whatever it might be. All that information is probably going to start to run together a little bit somehow, some way. So however you stay organized, whatever that is, leverage it, use it, because eventually, if you're like almost everyone else I work with, it'll start to run together over time. Talking about informational interviews, what they are and what they're not. It's an interview, you asking questions of another person driven by prepared questions that reflect your genuine curiosity. It's an opportunity for you to listen and to learn, and it's a chance to relationship build. Really, informational interviewing is all get down to. It's networking 101 stuff. Networking is extremely important when it comes to your job search. I know a lot of people just sort of, the word networking sort of is sort of it's almost like a 4-letter word. It sends a shiver down people's spines. But this is something that is really, really important when it comes to managing your career. There are a number of different ways you can go about doing it. And again, later in the webinar, I'll kind of walk you through one way that you can approach informational interviews. What they're not is a chance for you to do a lot of talking and to convince this other person that, just how awesome you are. It's not what it is. It's not a chance to gather basic information. What I mean by that is if you're doing an informational interview of someone who works at the ABC company, this informational interview is not where you are going to ask very basic elementary questions about the ABC company. It's not what you do here. You've already done all that research. And so when you're sitting down face to face and taking someone's time to find out more, you're asking more in-depth questions. You've already proven you've done your research on the basic stuff, and now you're going to a deeper level. And finally, an informational interview is not a covert means for asking for a job. This is not the setting where you, at the end of it, you ask, say, hey, could you pass my resume along? That's not what we're doing here. What you are doing is relationship building, and maybe down the road, assuming things go well, maybe now you have someone, an inside person at an organization that maybe can help you, but the informational interview is not the setting to ask for a job. You just don't do it. It's bad practice. It's bad form. That's not where you do it. So I'm going to go through each of those 4 questions and talk a little bit about the research area around it and some potential questions for an informational interview for each of those 4 roles. And then we'll go into the kind of the setup of like how to actually go about doing, how to sort of approach for informational interview. So the functional roles, here are 3 websites that you can explore. Learnhowtobecome.org, pretty self-explanatory. For job seekers, ONET is the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Phenomenal information, and also a subsidiary of that is mynextmove.org. They have a ton of career research information on there, statistics, information about functional roles, definitely worth checking out. Here's some potential interview questions as well that you could ask someone in an informational interview setting. I know these slides are going to be made available to you afterward, and so you can leverage these questions if you so choose in an informational interview. Secondly, once again, I'm exploring industries. Here are some other resources for you for your research. BLS is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. IAG is Industry at a Glance. Pretty self-explanatory there. Once again, ONET and mynextmove.org is going to have tons of opportunity for you there. Trade publications. I mentioned that because it's so important, because if you're not aware, almost every industry has a trade publication, either in online form or in print form. If you don't believe me, I have a relative that once was the editor for the trade publication for the art and framing industry, as in, picture frames, like behind me. There's an entire trade publication just for the framing industry. Nothing against the framing industry, but that's, to me, that's a pretty niche kind of thing. If they have their own publication, I'm pretty sure that every industry and every functional area has its own trade publication. Do some looking around. What are the pervasive themes in those trade publications? What kinds of things seem to be discussed on a regular basis? What are the current trends? What's going on? That you get a sense of what's going on in those functional areas and in those industries. And once again, here's a list of sample questions that you could ask in an informational interview relative to your exploring industries. Okay, organizations, the third thing. Here's, once again, where you can do some online research before you would do an informational interview. Glassdoor, if you haven't explored Glassdoor, that's a big job searcher website. Check it out. There's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of forums on there, and there's a lot of opportunity for current and former employees to provide feedback. Take all that with a grain of salt. Obviously, there are going to be people who are exceedingly pleased with an organization. There are going to be people who are the opposite when they give reviews about what it's like to work at certain companies. Look for, sort of big picture overall themes. Even the greatest companies out there aren't going to have perfect, every employee is perfectly happy, but look for big picture themes on Glassdoor. Hoover's is a great site to check out company research specifically. Go to companies or organizations, go to their formal website, go to the social media. Just when you do that, of course, understand that those websites, the social media are usually going to be run by the communications office, the PR office, and you're going to probably get all the positive spin, if you will, on what's going on at the organization. So check it out, and it's a good source of information. You can find out what's going on at the organization, but just understand that it may not be sort of the unvarnished version of kind of what's going on there. For that, you might go to Google News. Check, obviously, when you go to Google News and you search on a certain organization, check it out. Make sure that you're going to a reputable news organization for your information on that, because sometimes Google News will direct you to basically public relations sites that, again, are going to give sort of the upbeat and the positive sort of thing. So those are ways you can explore the organizations. And once again, there are some potential informational interview questions that you might ask in that setting. Finally, the gotta haves. The first one is family and loved ones. So why, that's a little bit of an outlier given the other areas of research that I've provided here. So why is that important? Well, I assume that for most of us, we have at least someone or someones else who have a say in this whole thing. And whether it's the salary question or the location question or the schedule question, making sure that you and your family and loved ones are together on what is feasible and what is not feasible before you start that job search is a really important step. Because think about this, you get into a situation where you're progressing with a company, you think it's a great fit, everything's wonderful, all these different sorts of things, and then you almost get to the point, or you get to the point where you actually have an offer from that organization, and then at that moment is when you first bring up the possibility, or bring up some of the particulars to your significant other, and there's some deal breaker in whatever you already know about that organization, just on like an elementary level. Something that if you had had that conversation, 2 months earlier, or 3 months earlier, or 3 weeks earlier, whatever, that you could have avoided, and you could have not wasted your time, not wasted the organization's time, and going all those applications and going all those interviews and everything else. You need to the extent everyone's different on this, but you need to involve those individuals from a high level just to make sure everyone's together on what those gotta haves are. Other sites are listed here: salary.com and Salary Expert. For those of you who mentioned the importance of salary and other compensation, you can get a pretty high level understanding of what salaries are in certain functional areas, and even drill down to the company and organizational specific levels. Glassdoor also has salary information as well. And so these are things that you can use to explore those gotta haves. And finally, once again, there are some sample questions that you could use for informational interviews, the questions that you can use in that setting. So there's some ways that you can go about getting specific answers to those questions, and so that you can use research and you can use informational interviewing to get to, as we saw several slides earlier, a very specific level of knowledge of what you're looking for and what you're targeting in your next role. So this is the last sort of section that we'll go through before we get to questions. Again, please be thinking of questions for me. We'll use the chat tab on that, and have Cassie manage that after I wrap this part up. But what I want to do is walk you through sort of how to go about getting an informational interview. And I recognize that, again, some of this might be kind of obvious to some of you. For others, this might be the first time you've ever heard some of these things. I've learned to avoid making assumptions in my coaching. I just want to make sure, as much as I can, everyone kind of has a level playing field of kind of how you go about doing these informational interviews. So how do you get one? You got to ask. You need to identify in your network people who have a functional role that you're interested in, work for an industry, they work for a company, they have other things that you want to learn more about relative to their professional world. LinkedIn is huge. I could give an entire webinar on the value of LinkedIn and how you go about having a strong LinkedIn presence. It's extremely important to people who are looking at their career, looking at different jobs. It is absolutely essential that you have a strong presence on LinkedIn. If nothing else, a strong profile there. And that's really all I'm going to say about LinkedIn for the moment anyway. Again, informational interviewing is networking 101. You have to be willing to sort of approach people, ask people, hey, would you be willing to sit down with me and talk a little bit about you and your career path, and just answer some questions for me. Email and LinkedIn messaging is the best way to start the conversation. Communicate what you're looking for. Make it clear that you want to learn from their experience and expertise, nothing more. I talk to a lot of people about when they get invitations for these sorts of things, and I think a lot of people are concerned initially, unless it's specifically stated from the person asking for it, that they're going to basically be getting into a situation and they're going to be asked for a job, or they're going to somehow be otherwise put in an awkward situation. And that's why I think it's really important that anyone asking for an informational interview clarify up front what it specifically is that they want here, and that nothing more, that they're not looking for anything else. Coffee shops and lunches are good. Avoid happy hours. It's just a bad situation. It's just, you're asking for trouble there. If you absolutely have to, I guess that's a personal decision, but coffees, breakfasts, lunches, those kinds of things. Remember who's doing, I mentioned this a couple times. I think it's just that important. Remember who's doing who a favor here. So to the extent that you can, you want to travel, if there's travel involved, as it usually is, you want to go to them, not them come to you. Okay, so if they're on the other side of town, then you need to go to the other side of town. That's just kind of what we do. Acknowledge that they're busy. Tell them specifically how much time you're thinking about, 15 to 30 minutes. Link to your LinkedIn profile in your requests. Keep it brief. And, it's okay to follow up after a couple weeks or so. Obviously, again, keep it gentle, keep it professional. And here's the thing. Some people in the professional world sort of get this. They understand the value of networking. They like to network. They're happy to sit down with you and to sort of, give back, if you will. And give back is probably not the right word to say there. They're happy to help you out. Okay. But some people, they're not like that. Some people just, for whatever reason, they're not good at these sorts of things and they're not receptive to it. And that's why my last point on this slide is very important. I think if you don't hear back, don't take it personally. Okay. It's okay. Don't think that you did something wrong. Don't think that they're, a rude person necessarily. It's just that for whatever reason, you didn't hear back. Hey, if you reached out to them on LinkedIn, maybe they're the kind of person who only checks their LinkedIn profile once a month. And, 5 weeks later after your original inquiry, maybe you hear back from them. And so just don't take it personally, just move on to the next one. And it's just the way it goes sometimes. When you use LinkedIn, you use it to identify mutual contacts. You could, this is like the prep beforehand though, okay? See who else they know, where they went to school, if they went to Northwestern or if they went somewhere else. Know what they look like. We'll know why that's important because when you meet them somewhere, when they walk into that coffee shop, when they walk into the lunch, you want to have a sense of, oh, that's the person I'm meeting. It's always better if you have a sense of what they look like. And so that you're not kind of in an awkward situation otherwise. Obviously be careful about stalking. There's a very fine line between doing your online research and stalking the other person. So find out what you can about the individual and prepare your questions. You are driving the conversation in an informational interview. And so it's up to you to prepare questions to make sure that you have the chance that you ask your questions. That's the whole goal of this whole thing. That's the whole point why you're here. And also be ready to prepare some questions about yourself because generally in a conversation, even in an informational interview, there's going to be some give and take. And it would be very natural and understandable and perhaps even expected if that other person might have you, hey, so you're thinking about changing jobs? So tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your background? Are you really, hey, are you really interested in or working for my company? That's the kind of thing you need to be at least prepared on a elementary level to address some of those basic questions. Confirm the meeting a day beforehand. Get there early, get a table that allows for private conversation as much as you can. Keep an eye on the entrance and be on the lookout for them. First impressions go a long way, Smile, stand up. Dude, I always hate when this happens. Someone, stand up, get out of the seat, shake hands, and then, okay, sit down. First and last name. Okay, professionalism. Okay, we're not, meeting, a friend or an acquaintance. This is a professional thing. First and last name. Offer to buy them a cup of coffee. Offer to buy. If they refuse, don't force it. Don't make a big deal out of that. Be prepared with some small talk. And then transition. Ask them if they can jump in. Asking if hey, can we jump into some of my questions right now? Start with the high level ones. Then work to more specific. Acknowledge what they are telling you, okay? One of the biggest things that I get feedback when it comes to interviews, whether it's a professional interview or an informational interview, is that the individual asking, when someone provides really good information, I ask a question and that person answers the question and they provide really good information or some really interesting insight, or they take the conversation kind of in a different avenue, and then there's a pause in the conversation and I just immediately jump to the next question. That's not what you want. You want to practice active listening, hear what they have to say, maybe ask a follow-up question. If the conversation goes in a certain area or certain direction that you hadn't anticipated, especially if that kind of goes to some of your future questions that you were going to ask, go ahead and let it go there. You can come back to those original stuff, the original train of topics a little later on. And so just make sure that you're practicing. Yes, this is for you to gather information, but you need to practice active listening. Nothing turns off someone who's granted you an information interview more is if they don't feel like they're being listened to, okay? Once again, remember who's doing who a favor here. Be aware of the time. If you committed to 30 minutes, don't go over 30 minutes. If you have to look at your watch, do so acknowledging that you want to be respectful of their time. And on top of that, do not ask them for more time. If they volunteer that they can stay a little longer, if the conversation seems to be going well, great, go ahead and do that. But please, please, please be respectful of the other person's time because they're busy too and they've got things they need to be doing. That's why, again, having your questions prepared beforehand and being kind of ready for that is going to be really, really important. At the end of the informational interview, what else do you think I should know? Just kind of a broad question that, in case there's something else that's kind of lingering out there that you didn't have a chance to ask, or something that they really think, maybe something that you couldn't even think of, you didn't even know about, but it's something that, they really want to convey to you. And then kind of that final thing that, hey, if I think of anything else, can I contact you a little bit later, or can I ask any other questions online or by LinkedIn? In fact, I don't think I've ever heard of someone saying no to that request. And so making sure that you kind of keep the door open for future questions and for future networking. And then wrap it up with, again, strong, confident handshake. Thank them for their time. Follow up with a written thank you ASAP. It doesn't have to be a handwritten note. If you do that, that's fine. But again, if it's usually however you set the thing up to begin with. So if it was via LinkedIn, fine, LinkedIn. Email is fine too. But obviously be gracious, thank them for their time. Make sure that they have your contact information. If it went well and you feel comfortable doing it, if you're not already connected via LinkedIn, that would be the appropriate moment where you could send them an invitation. And that way you can keep track of each other and continue the networking at a future time. So that's sort of how it happens successfully. One thing in wrapping up, and before we get to sort of Q&A here, it is one of the things that I see so often among potential job seekers is that sort of the initial challenge of sort of getting over that initial hump, where they think they're going to look for a new job, or they think it's time for them to do something different, and they're thinking about it, and they're thinking about it, and they're thinking about it, and they just can't quite get over that preliminary hump of just starting the process. Okay, I get it. I've been there. I understand how that goes. If you can just start by doing just a little bit a day, start by doing just something very simple and very basic. Online research, as part of what we talked about earlier today, is a great way to get started. And starting off with the informational interviewing is another thing. I understand that some people might find the informational interviewing setting a little, I don't say awkward or uncomfortable, but it's not sort of natural to them. I would have two suggestions for that. Number one is start off by your very first informational interview. Do it with someone you know. Do it with a trusted friend. I don't know about you, but for me, many of my friends, I've known for a long time. I know kind of the high level stuff about their jobs and their careers and that sort of thing, but there are certain details about their day-to-day activities, their responsibilities. There are all these different sorts of things that I don't know much about. And so start with a friendly setting. Approach someone who you can trust. And so if it's a little awkward, basically do a rehearsal with someone you trust, and then get their feedback afterward. Hey, did that go well? Would you prefer I did something different or whatever? And then commit to doing 5 of them over 2 months or something like that. Real informational interviews. Go to your network. Go online to LinkedIn. Think about people you know well in your network. People, again, who work at a certain company or organization or a functional role that you think would be interesting. And just put yourself out there. And I will mention too, by the way, that ideally informational interviewing is best done face-to-face. That is the best way to do it. That's also the biggest commitment of time and everything else. There are certain individuals who are just so busy, they're just based on their schedules or whatever, that kind of thing just isn't possible. Informational interviews via email is okay. The reason I say it's okay is that, yeah, you'll get information that you were hoping for as part of the informational interview. But again, one of the things that you're also trying to do with an informational interview is to build that relationship and potentially expand your network for the future. And that is done less effectively via email. So that should be your kind of, if nothing else, go for the in-person, informational interview wherever possible. Well, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this. I hope you've gotten some good value out of this. We're about to transition to the Q&A, but as promised, here on this final slide, you can see my contact information. Again, if you're interested in coaching or if you have any follow-up questions for me, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to interact with you and go from there. Best of luck to each of you on your career journeys. Thank you again for being here. And Cassie, what questions do we have?
Yeah, great, Kevin. Thanks so much for all of this really detailed information. We have a number of really great questions that we'll get started with. And of course, as Kevin has encouraged folks, I will also encourage you to send in any questions you may have. So we're going to get started with Cindy. Her question's been upvoted a couple different times. What is a good subject line in an email trying to set up an informational interview?
Well, great question. It depends on how. My number one question there is, do you know the person already? And again, you're sort of either starting a relationship or you're establishing a relationship. My thought again is on those emails, or if it's a LinkedIn message or whatever, you want to be as succinct as possible, and you want to make sure that you don't beat around the bush and you kind of get right to the point. So requested 30 minutes of your time for an informational interview. Be direct with it. Don't beat around the bush. That kind of thing. Just real straightforward. You're making a request. How much time you're asking them, and for what?
Yeah, that's great. Very specific, and people will know what you're asking for. I've definitely stumbled over that one as well in the past. So great question. And Jennifer is writing in, is it appropriate to take notes during the informational interview, or is that awkward?
It is appropriate to take notes during the informational interview if you can do so in a way. First of all, I would ask the other individual, hey, do you mind if I take a few quick notes here? And just make sure that they're comfortable with that, because if for some reason there are people who actually are not comfortable with that. And the other reason one reason for that is, first of all, it can sort of interrupt the flow of the conversation. But the other thing is that if you're asking someone about their company and you're asking about, hey, what's great about working for this organization, or what are some of the things that this organization can do better? If you're making notes about basically what you're asking is some of the shortcomings of that organization, you're writing that down, that can influence their perceived ability to communicate with you in an unvarnished and candid way. So is it okay? Yeah. My suggestion on that, is it okay? Yeah, it's okay if you, first of all, ask them if that's all right. My recommended strategy on that, though, is that, hey, we're talking about 20 or 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more for one of these things. I'd go without taking notes. Maybe for very high level things, maybe jot a couple quick things down. But after the informational interview, as soon as you can, do just a big brain dump of all the things that you talked about, all the things that were brought up, all of your takeaways, all the discovery points that you had. And again, file that away, and however you keep track of all these different things. While it's still there in your short-term memory, dump it all out and do it that way. I think is the more effective way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you remember it down the road, but not right in the minute you're doing the notes.
Right.
It's great. And Jordan is asking if you can give examples of what you consider in-depth versus basic questions that, to the person you're having this informational interview with.
Well, obviously it depends on kind of what what you're if let's say that we're talking about we're probing on the various, this is a company that you're thinking about targeting. And so something that would be very high level would be something about what is the outlook for this company look to be over the next 2 to 3 years? What are some of the new markets that this company is looking to get into in the short term and in the long term? Again, high level sorts of forecasting sorts of things. Specific things would be, hey, as I was preparing for our interview today, I saw that one of your closest competitors has made 2 huge acquisitions within the past 18 months. And they're really making an inroads into some specific areas that you guys have a strength in. How have you competitively reacted to that? And do you think that your company is an acquisition target? That's something that's very specific, again, relative to your research. And so, ask questions that don't just ask questions to ask questions. Ask questions that you are truly interested in knowing what the answer is. If you're asking about what new markets and what new areas they might be getting into, that could be something. For example, if you are from a certain city and you and your family want to get back to that city, but this company currently doesn't have a presence in that city, you could find out, hey, are they targeting, expanding to Los Angeles or Denver or, Boise, Idaho, or whatever it might be, and find that out. If you're talking the latter question, if you're asking about, whether or not they're, what these competitive moves and if you're an acquisition target, and if you're the kind of person who values some job stability, what you're probing on there is you're finding out whether or not, what it looks like relative to job security. And is this company likely going to get acquired sometime soon? And as everyone knows, that can have an impact on, job security and just people having jobs and that kind of thing. So yeah, start bigger and work your way down. I love that question. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And we have a couple questions that are similar from Janet and Steve talking about employment gaps and how to address that, and also what advice you have for folks who are relaunching after a career break.
Sure. So gaps in the resume. Once upon a time, a gap in, so big picture here, okay. The whole job cycle, people, the whole reason why we, talk about things like informational interviewing and changing jobs and managing your career and that kind of thing is reflective of sort of a bigger picture sort of thing that goes on with careers. And what I mean by that is that today, once upon a, it wasn't that long, it was, 20, 25 years ago when sort of the norm when it comes to jobs and careers and that kind of thing, many people would, work for one company their entire career. They'd put in their 25 or 35 or 30 or whatever years in that organization. And then, they'd retire, they'd, get a, gold watch from the company president. They'd have a shake their hand and get their picture taken in the company newsletter, and they'd retire, and maybe they had a pension, and that was it. And they work with one organization their entire careers. That still does happen, for some individuals, and certainly nothing wrong with that. But that happens less and less and less. If you're familiar with the term gig economy, more and more people are changing jobs more and more often. It's, people these days, after, they've been at a role for 5 years or so, often are looking for different roles. Again, that's just, for some individuals. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but people change jobs a lot. Relative to that, people often now more will have gaps in their resumes, whether it was because of a layoff, whether it was because something intentional, or something else. Having a gap in your resume, while at one time was really not good, now it's not great, but it's not bad, especially if you have a reason behind it, and a good reason behind it. Most hiring managers, most leaders, most recruiters these days understand that people have other things going on in their lives. Whether you took time out for family reasons, whether that was to start a family or to take care of a sick family member, or for any other family reasons, for some health concerns, whatever it is, people these days understand that these things happen and that there may be a gap on the resume. And so I would encourage individuals to, and when it comes to just the overall job search process, again, whether it's relative to informational interviewing actually for the job, any other networking activity, whatever it might be, don't be ashamed or don't shy from a gap in the resume. Acknowledge that it's there. What you do need to have is a good explanation of why it's there. You need to explain, hey, this is what was going on, or this is what happened. And if you will, just the expression, own it. Just don't shy from it. Own it. Have a good explanation of what it is, and then be focused on the future. This is what happened. This is what that was, or this is what I was doing at that time. But right now, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm targeting. This is what I'm really excited about. And usually keep the focus on moving forward, not about, why, 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 8 years ago, there was a gap in your resume. On top of that, people re-entering the workforce for whatever reason, I think one of the biggest things that recruiters and hiring managers the thought will go through their mind on individuals like that is just the fact that, okay, they've been out of the professional work world for this time. And relative to that industry or that company or that functional area, how are they still plugged in? How are they still prepared? Are they going to be able to jump right back in and, basically be a productive employee in a short amount of time once we onboard them into our organization? And so, for example, if someone took whatever it might be, 5 or 10 years off for family reasons, whatever those family reasons might be, for a lot of different roles, okay, we have to have our, great examples, we have to have our computer skills up, right? It seems like every other month, Microsoft is coming out with new versions of this or new editions of that, or, you've got different ways to communicate or whatever it might be. The question is that for that recruiter or for that hiring manager is, hey, has this person been keeping current on these things? Are we going to have to basically reteach them basic skills, or are they plug and play? Are they ready to go? And so to the extent that you can demonstrate that you have stayed current, that you have stayed up on the up and up, that works in your favor a lot more. If it's a computer thing, hey, maybe you take some sort of online course and get some sort of online certificate that says, yeah, I've got these certifications. Maybe you do recertify in a certain area, depending, again, on what your functional area is, what you do, what that may be. The other thing is that in those informational interviews and those phone screens and those other things, in the other points of interaction that you have with organizations, if you have been keeping up, if you know what's going on, if you are plugged in, if you still speak the language of that organization and of that industry, it will come forward. You will not come across as someone who is kind of out of touch and is, oh, I'm just, in other words, if you come across as you are in this, you are ready to re-enter and you're good to go and you are ready, that will come through, and any possible objections that they may have will reduce or go away.
Yeah, that's great. And Kevin, I think we might have time to take one more question. We have a ton of questions that have come in, which is really great. Thank you, everybody who's been sending in questions. There's this topic of basically not going into an informational interview, asking for a job. You don't want to just blatantly ask. Right. But how do you broach that subject? Karen is in a situation where she's wanting to explore, working in a different team within her organization. She has an informational interview set up with, a colleague, and she asked about opportunities for collaboration, but wants to know if there's potential to work in that area. How do you handle those types of situations?
Yeah, and that's a great point, and that is that informational interviews can happen external to your organization or internal to your current organization. People who are looking to switch functional roles, one of the best ways to do that is within your current organization, because in theory, you've been there for a while, you're a good cultural fit. I assume you do a good job for them, and you're a known entity there. And if it's perceived that switching functional areas entails a little bit of risk because, hey, this person has, never done this before, at least that way you're a little bit of a risk, because you're kind of, you're a known entity. They kind of know who you are and know that you're a good overall fit. And many organizations, especially the really progressive ones, would much rather retain you and try you in a new role rather than lose you altogether. So it is a fine line with informational interviews when it comes to suggesting. I think that suggesting that you're interested in the job. I think let me clarify here, and that is that if you're asking someone a bunch of questions about their functional role or about their company or about their department, your interest in potentially working there sort of inherently kind of comes through without you actually having to actually say it. It is acceptable near the tail end of an informational interview. You have to get a bit of a feel for this, because some people are obviously, if you're talking with someone, some people you'll get a feel that they're much more receptive to this. Other people, they're fine being there and they're happy to answer questions, but you might not sort of get that warm and fuzzy feeling. There's nothing wrong with saying something to the effect of, hey, this was really good. You've only increased my interest in working in that different area. I don't want to create uncomfortable situations, but if there was anything that ever came up that I could potentially be a fit for, I'd really appreciate you keeping me in mind. You're not asking for a job. You're not saying, will you give my resume to the hiring manager, or will you hire me, or anything like that. You're asking them that, if appropriate, if something happens, I would appreciate you keeping me in mind. That's all you're saying. You're planting that seed even more. That is appropriate for both internal and for external.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Kevin. And this has been great getting your answers to some of these really specific questions. And I let everybody know, we're sorry we can't get to everybody's questions, but Kevin's email is obviously on the slide. And I sent it out in the chat, so you all have that there as well, if there are follow-up questions. So
absolutely.
Kevin, thanks so much for spending this last hour with us. We really appreciate, everything that you shared and answering our questions. So thanks again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Cassie.
Great. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. You can find all of our archived and upcoming webinars on our website at alumni.northwestern.edu/career webinars. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and go Cats.